You're about to hear a story that sounds impossible, something straight out of a nightmare or a supernatural thriller, but this happened to me. I married her in June. The woman I loved, the one I promised forever to. But when I saw her gravestone, it told a completely different story. It said she died in April, 2 months before we even said I do. If that sounds confusing or even unbelievable, trust me, I'm still trying to make sense of it myself. And in this video, I'm going to take you deep inside this mystery, piece by piece, so you can understand everything that happened. I promise, by the end, you'll know the whole truth. But before we get there, I want you to stick with me, because what I'm about to reveal will challenge everything you think you know about reality, love, and trust. You might start doubting your own memories by the time I'm done. This isn't just some eerie coincidence or a simple mistake on a gravestone. Something much darker and stranger is going on here, something that's already shattered my life and could very well change how you see the people closest to you. I don't want to rush through this, because every detail matters. From the moment I first met her, to the day we said our vows, and finally to the moment I uncovered that impossible gravestone. Each part holds clues to the mystery, and if you want to understand what really happened, you need to hear it all. So, if you're ready, grab a seat, clear your mind, and let's dive into the story of how I married a woman who, according to her gravestone, had been dead for months before I even met her. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, maybe it's a mix-up, some kind of clerical error, or a cruel prank. I thought that too, at first. But this story isn't just about a wrong date on a stone. It's about the strange messages she started getting before our wedding, the secret phone calls she never wanted me to hear, and the terrifying feeling that someone, or something, was watching us from the shadows. You're probably wondering who she was. What kind of person could be at the center of such a strange and heartbreaking mystery? I'm going to introduce you to her now, because understanding who she was is the key to understanding everything that came after. Her name was Emily. Beautiful, kind, and full of life. Or, at least, that's what I thought she was when I first met her. Emily had this warmth that drew people to her, a light in her eyes that made you believe anything was possible. But as we got closer, I started noticing little things that didn't add up. Strange gaps in her stories about her past, late nights where she'd disappear without telling me where she was going, and sometimes, a distant look in her eyes like she was carrying a heavy secret she couldn't share. I brushed it off, thinking everyone has their quirks. Love makes you blind sometimes, right? But now, looking back, those were the first cracks in the perfect picture I thought I was painting. You see, Emily and I met in April, just a few days after the date on that gravestone. We connected instantly, and everything moved so fast. By June, we were married. The happiest I had ever been. I believed I'd found my soulmate, someone to spend the rest of my life with. But the gravestone shattered all of that in a heartbeat. How could the woman I married be dead 2 months before I met her? It made no sense. And this is where the real mystery begins. Because when I started digging, trying to find out how this could be possible, I uncovered things I wish I never had. Old records that didn't match, people who refused to talk, and an unsettling feeling that Emily's life was much more complicated than I ever imagined. There were whispers about her family, strange disappearances, and a past so tangled it felt like something out of a thriller movie. If you've ever felt like you were living someone else's story, or like a loved one was hiding a part of themselves from you, you're going to relate to this. Because that's exactly what I went through. Every step of this journey has been a roller coaster of hope, fear, confusion, and heartbreak. I want to share it all with you, not just to tell a story, but because there's a lesson in here about trust, reality, and the things we never expect from the people we think we know best. And here's the thing. I'm not just telling you this for the shock factor. I want you to understand the human side of this mystery. The loneliness, the doubt, the moments when I question my own sanity. I'm inviting you in not as a distant viewer, but as someone who cares enough to listen and maybe even help unravel what happened. Because this isn't just about Emily or me. It's about all of us and the secrets we keep, the pasts we run from, and the truths that refuse to stay buried. Throughout this video, I'll share with you every piece of evidence I found, every strange phone call, every unexpected visitor, and every night I spent awake wondering who the woman I married really was. I'll introduce you to the people who knew her before me, some who want to help and some who clearly want to keep the past hidden. You'll hear about the gravestone itself, how I stumbled upon it, and the chilling moment when the weight of that date finally hit me like a punch to the gut. If you're watching this right now, I want you to do something for me. Think about the people closest to you, your spouse, your family, your friends. What if there was something you didn't know? Something that could change everything you thought you knew about them? That's the question I've been living with every day since I found that gravestone. And it's the question I want you to carry with you as you watch this story unfold. Because the answer isn't just some date or some name on a stone. It's a truth buried under layers of mystery, lies, and maybe even something supernatural. It's a truth I'm still searching for. And I'm going to take you there with me every step of the way. So if you want to understand how I married a woman who, on paper, had been dead for 2 months before I met her, stay right here. Don't look away. Because this story will pull you in, twist your mind, and maybe even change how you see the world around you. It's a story about love, loss, and the strange lines between life and death that sometimes blur in ways we can't explain. Sure. Here's the continuation, diving deeper into the mystery with a natural, suspenseful flow that introduces background, red herrings, and tension to keep your US audience hooked. After that shocking discovery of Emily's gravestone, I couldn't just sit back and pretend everything was normal. I had to retrace every moment, every conversation, every strange detail I'd overlooked before. I kept thinking back to the months leading up to our wedding, trying to piece together what might explain how this could even be possible. Emily had seemed so real, so alive, yet now her death date was staring me in the face like some cruel riddle I couldn't solve. It was like a dark cloud had settled over everything we had built together, and I was desperate to understand why. In those weeks before our wedding, things had felt a little off. Nothing glaring, nothing that screamed danger, but the little things started piling up in my mind. There were those evenings when Emily's phone would buzz silently on the kitchen counter, and she'd quickly hide it from me. Sometimes she'd get sudden calls from numbers I didn't recognize, and when I asked who it was, she'd smile nervously and say it was just a work thing. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust her fully. But the nagging feeling that she was hiding something began to grow. I remember one night in particular, just days before we were supposed to pick out flowers for the wedding, when she left the house abruptly. No explanation. Just slipped out the door, dressed in her coat, and didn't come back for hours. I tried calling her, texting, but no response. When she finally came back, she acted like nothing had happened, but I could see the strain in her eyes, like she'd been running from something or someone. I asked if she was okay, and she just shook her head and said, "It's nothing. Don't worry about it." But of course, I worried. Then there was the weird message I found on her phone one morning, a single word, "Remember," sent from a blocked number. I asked Emily about it, and she immediately deleted the message and told me not to ask questions. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a harmless secret. Something was seriously wrong. But I still didn't know what or why. As I tried to make sense of it all, I also thought about her family. Emily's relationship with them was complicated. She'd always been a little distant when I asked about her parents or siblings, and she avoided introducing me to them. When I pressed for answers, she'd change the subject or say they were not really around. It wasn't like she was ashamed or embarrassed. It was more like she was scared. I later learned from some people in town that Emily's family had a history of tragedy and disappearances, but the details were murky, filled with rumors and silence. Nobody seemed willing to talk openly, and that only made the mystery thicker. I started reaching out to old acquaintances, hoping someone might fill in the blanks. Some people seemed eager to help, but others acted like I was digging up things best left buried. One man I met, Emily's childhood neighbor, warned me to stop asking questions, saying it would only bring trouble. His eyes looked tired and scared, like he knew something terrible but was too afraid to say it aloud. That only made me more determined to find out the truth. Of course, with every step I took, shadows started moving around me. Strange cars parked outside my house late at night, unfamiliar faces watching from a distance, and once, someone tried to break in. It felt like the closer I got to the truth, the more dangerous it became. But who was behind it? Was it someone from Emily's past? Or something else entirely? I even found an old journal she kept hidden in a drawer. The pages were filled with fragmented thoughts, sketches of places I'd never heard of, and references to a time that wasn't hers. Reading it felt like stepping into someone else's nightmare. There were mentions of voices, dreams, and shadows that whispered secrets she couldn't share. I tried to ask her about the journal, but she always refused to talk about it. Now, I wish I'd pushed harder. The strangest thing was the way Emily reacted when I showed her the gravestone. At first, she froze, her face draining of color. Then, with a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "You shouldn't have seen that." It was the first time I saw genuine fear in her eyes, fear that went beyond anything I'd witnessed before. It made me question everything I thought I knew about her. In the days after that, my world felt like it was unraveling. The more I dug, the more tangled the story became. People who once seemed friendly turned cold or hostile. Calls went unanswered. Doors were closed in my face. But some clues did emerge. Old photographs where Emily looked different, dates that didn't add up, and whispers about someone who looked just like her but had vanished years ago. I can't tell you exactly what all this means yet. Because even now, with everything I've uncovered, there are moments when the mystery deepens instead of clears. There are things I can't explain, like the sudden phone calls in the middle of the night with no one on the other end, or the way Emily sometimes stares off into space, as if she's somewhere else entirely. And then there's the gravestone itself, standing there in the old cemetery like a ghostly reminder of a life that may or may not have been hers. This isn't just a story about loss or grief. It's about how sometimes the past refuses to stay buried, and how people can carry secrets so heavy they change the course of their entire lives. It's about trust and deception, about love that defies logic, and about the terrifying possibility that the person you think you know best might be hiding a truth you're not prepared to face. As I share this with you, I want you to keep your eyes open for the details that don't quite fit. The small inconsistencies that might seem insignificant, but could hold the key to unlocking the whole puzzle. Because in stories like this, it's rarely the obvious that leads to the truth. It's the shadows lurking in the corners, the things whispered in silence, and the unexpected twists that make you question everything you thought was real. So, as we continue this journey, keep in mind that every character you'll meet, every event you'll hear about, could be a piece of the puzzle, or a red herring designed to throw us off track. The line between friend and foe isn't always clear, and sometimes the people who seem closest to you are the ones who know the darkest secrets. The deeper I tried to dig into Emily's past, the more resistance I encountered, almost like some invisible force was determined to keep the truth buried. Just when I thought I was getting close, something always seemed to slip through my fingers, vanishing without explanation. One night, I returned home to find the old journal I'd found in her drawer gone, completely missing. No sign of a break-in, nothing else disturbed, but that journal, the one filled with her cryptic notes and sketches, had disappeared. It was the one piece of the puzzle I was counting on, the one that might have finally explained the impossible date on her gravestone. Its disappearance hit me hard. It was as if someone was watching me, someone who didn't want me to know what Emily had been hiding. And then came the warning. I got a phone call late at night from a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was low, almost a whisper, but clear. "Stop looking into this. Some things are better left alone." My heart pounded as I listened, the chill of fear sinking in. Who was this? Why did they care so much about what I was doing? The message wasn't a threat in the usual sense, but it carried a weight that made me hesitate for a moment. But I knew I couldn't stop, not now. Not when I was so close. That same week, an old friend of Emily's reached out to me, someone I'd never met before. He introduced himself as Mark and said he'd known Emily years ago, long before I ever did. At first, he seemed like an ally, offering to help me piece together the parts of her life I couldn't access. But something about Mark felt off. He was evasive about certain details and changed the subject when I asked about Emily's family. I found out later, Through quiet whispers and half-remembered rumors, that Mark had a troubled past himself, with stories of betrayal and broken trust. Could he really be someone I could depend on? Or was he playing a role in this strange web of secrets? I didn't know who to trust anymore. Then there was the night I found a box hidden behind the loose panel in our attic, a box filled with old photographs and letters addressed to Emily from someone named Elle. The letters were cryptic, hinting at a secret relationship, a betrayal, and a past Emily never spoke about. The more I read, the more it became clear that Emily had been running from something or someone for years. But who was Elle? A lover? An enemy? Or something far more dangerous? I tried to ask Emily about it, but every time I did, she'd brush it off, her eyes clouding with pain and fear. As if the mysterious phone call and missing journal weren't enough, I started noticing strange things around the house. Items moved, doors unlocked that I was sure I'd locked, and at times, a faint smell of perfume lingering in the air when Emily wasn't home. It was as though someone else was sharing our space, watching from the shadows. Was it connected to Elle? Or was it something even more sinister? The line between paranoia and reality began to blur, and I found myself questioning everything, including my own judgment. The tension in the town grew too. People I approached for help suddenly went silent. I overheard hushed conversations when I entered a room, and neighbors that used to smile politely started giving me cold stares. It felt like I was being watched, followed. I couldn't shake the feeling that my search was stirring up ghosts, real or imagined, that were not happy with me digging into Emily's past. But perhaps the most devastating blow came when I discovered a secret from Emily's past, something she had buried so deeply it shook me to my core. She had been involved in a scandal years ago, a betrayal that fractured friendships and destroyed trust. The details were murky, but the impact was clear. She had lost people who once loved her, and maybe even parts of herself she never fully recovered. It explained some of her distance, her pain, but it also raised more questions. How much of that past had she brought into our marriage? And was that past connected to the impossible date on her gravestone? Every step forward felt like pushing through quicksand. The harder I tried, the more obstacles I faced. But I wasn't ready to give up. Because even with every door slammed in my face and every warning whispered in the dark, I knew that somewhere in this tangled web of secrets was the truth. The truth about Emily, about who she really was, and why her gravestone told a story so different from the one I lived every day. Just when I thought I might finally get a break, I received an anonymous package with a single photograph inside. It was a picture of Emily, but not the Emily I knew. This was an older photo, one where she looked almost unrecognizable, standing beside a man I didn't know. The photo was worn and faded, and on the back, a date was scribbled, April 15th. The same month and year she supposedly died. Why was this photo sent to me? Who sent it? And what did they want me to see? I stared at that photo for hours, heart racing, mind spinning. Was this a clue? A warning? Or something else entirely? The answers felt just out of reach, and yet the stakes had never been higher. Someone was playing a game, and I was caught in the middle. The question was, could I survive long enough to uncover the truth? Or would the secrets I chased end up destroying me? As I struggled to make sense of the faded photograph with the April date scribbled on the back, I wasn't prepared for how the mystery would twist in a way that pulled someone else I cared about into this dark, tangled web. Just days after receiving that chilling photo, my sister, Rachel, reached out to me with a trembling voice I barely recognized. She told me she'd found a strange envelope slipped under her door. Inside, a message almost identical to the warning I'd received on my phone. Stop digging. Walk away now. But the handwriting was different this time, more urgent, and accompanied by an old key tied to a faded ribbon. Rachel didn't know what it meant, but she knew it was connected to what I was chasing. Hearing her fear hit me like a punch to the gut, because it suddenly wasn't just my life being threatened. It was ours. Our families were now entwined in something bigger, darker, and far more dangerous than I ever imagined. What made it even worse was that the key didn't fit any lock we could find in Emily's belongings or our home. It was ancient, ornate, and looked like it belonged to another century altogether. But we both knew it wasn't random. It was meant to be found, a puzzle piece dropped into place by whoever was watching us. My mind raced with possibilities. Was this connected to Emily's secret past, or was it a trap designed to pull me deeper into something I wasn't ready for? Every instinct screamed to stop, but every part of me knew that if we walked away now, the questions would only grow louder. Then, out of nowhere, I learned that a key witness who'd been helping me, someone who claimed to know Emily's family history, had disappeared without a trace. No calls, no messages, no sign of where he'd gone. The last time anyone saw him was at the local coffee shop where he'd promised to share what he knew. When I arrived there, all I found was his abandoned phone, left behind on the table with a cracked screen and a final message typed but never sent. "It's not what you think." That cryptic note sent chills down my spine, and the realization hit me hard. I was no longer just uncovering a mystery. I was being hunted. The lines between friend and foe began to blur rapidly. I started second-guessing everyone around me, even Rachel, whose quiet demeanor suddenly seemed tinged with secrets of her own. Had she known more than she let on? Was she being watched too? Or worse, was someone close to me playing a part in this deadly game? Every glance felt heavier, every silence more suspicious. The fear wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about the present and the uncertain future that lay ahead. One night, as I pulled into the driveway after a long day of searching, I noticed a shadow lingering near the edge of the street. The figure vanished before I could get a clear look, but the message was unmistakable. I was being followed. My heart hammered as paranoia took hold, twisting my thoughts into knots. Could I trust the police? Would they believe me if I told them my wife's gravestone said she died 2 months before we married? I felt utterly alone in this, trapped between the fragments of a shattered past and the frightening unknown ahead. And then the direct threat came, a voicemail on my phone, heavy breathing followed by a chilling whisper. "Stop before it's too late." It was unmistakably close, like whoever it was right outside my door. That night, sleep abandoned me. The weight of fear pressed down so heavily I could barely breathe, and I found myself staring at the ceiling, wondering if the person I loved, the woman I married, had ever truly been who she claimed to be. Was I chasing shadows? Or had I uncovered a truth so dangerous it would cost me everything? This mystery was no longer just about a gravestone or a missing past. It was about survival, trust shattered, and a truth lurking just out of reach, waiting to drag me into darkness. As I write this, I don't know who to turn to, who to believe, or if I'll ever be safe again. All I know is that the answers lie somewhere in the shadows, and every step I take brings me closer to a danger I can't yet see, but feel with every beat of my racing heart. The darkness didn't just close in, it swallowed everything whole. It was late one night when I finally understood just how deep the danger ran, and how little control I really had over the nightmare I'd stumbled into. I had barely closed my eyes when the phone rang, its shrill tones slicing through the silence, like a knife. When I answered, there was only breathing on the other end, slow, deliberate, like someone savoring the fear they were inflicting. Then came the voice, a whisper so cold it froze my blood. "You shouldn't have come this far." That was the moment the walls of my world crumbled. I knew then that this wasn't about some lost past or a broken relationship. This was something darker, something dangerous, and it was targeting me. The next morning, everything started unraveling faster than I could keep up. Rachel, my sister, who had been quietly helping me piece together the fragments of Emily's secret life, was gone. Just disappeared. No note, no call, nothing. The police were sympathetic but skeptical. Disappearances happen, they said, but my gut screamed that hers was tied to this mystery. The fear gnawed at me. What if she was taken because of what she found? Or worse, what if she was involved in something I didn't understand? The people I once trusted now felt like strangers, their faces masks hiding agendas I couldn't begin to decode. Every step outside felt like walking into a trap. I noticed cars parked at odd angles on my street, shadows that lingered just beyond the glow of the porch light. The sensation of being watched was relentless, suffocating. I double-checked locks, installed cameras, and even changed my routines, but the fear only grew. What if the danger wasn't just around me, but inside my circle? Who among the people I leaned on was truly on my side? Could I trust my own instincts anymore? The questions spun in my mind, a dizzying storm of paranoia and dread. Then came the break-in. I wasn't home, but the damage was clear when I returned. Drawers pulled open, papers scattered, the unmistakable absence of the journal I'd once found in Emily's drawer. Whoever came knew what they were after and sent a brutal message. Back off or face worse. The police called it a burglary, but I knew better. This was a warning, and the silence that followed was deafening. My thoughts spiraled. Emily, the woman I married and thought I knew, was enveloped in secrets that now threatened to consume everyone around her. I questioned everything: her smiles, her silences, the unexplained phone calls, the letters from Elle, the faded photographs. Had I married a ghost? Or had I been living with someone trapped between two worlds, one alive and one dead? The gravestone's cruel riddle was only the surface of a much deeper enigma, one I was now hopelessly entangled in. Fear settled deep in my bones, but so did determination. I knew turning away wasn't an option, no matter how terrifying the path ahead. But I also realized I wasn't just chasing a mystery. I was running from an invisible predator whose next move could shatter what little was left of my life. And somewhere in the shadows, the truth waited, waiting to reveal itself, or to bury me forever. Just when I thought the pieces of this puzzle were finally falling into place, when I believed I was close to uncovering the truth that had haunted me for months, the entire story shifted beneath my feet like a cruel mirage. It came on a rainy evening, the kind where the world feels both soaked and shadowed, and the air is thick with tension. I got a call from Mark, the man who'd once seemed like an ally, but whose evasiveness had always set off alarms in my mind. His voice was strained, almost breaking, as he told me he had something I needed to see, a secret he hadn't dared share before, because he wasn't sure I was ready. I was desperate, so I agreed to meet him at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, a place where the shadows seemed to gather just a little too closely. When Mark slid a worn envelope across the table, my hands trembled. Inside were photos, old and grainy, depicting Emily. Not the woman I'd known, but someone who looked eerily like her, standing alongside a different man. But the biggest shock was in the dates scribbled on the back. They were from years ago, but here's the twist. The woman in the photos was identified not as Emily, but as her twin sister, someone Emily had never mentioned, someone who was presumed dead long before I even met her. I sat there, heart pounding, trying to reconcile the truth in front of me with the memories I held so close. How could Emily have a twin, and why had this part of her life been buried so deeply? Then Mark dropped the final bombshell. He confessed that the reason he'd stayed silent was because he was part of something much darker than I'd imagined. He'd been involved in covering up this family secret, protecting the sister's identity after her mysterious disappearance. That gravestone? It wasn't Emily's, it was her sister's. The twin had supposedly died in April, the same date on that stone, but no one really knew what had happened to her after that. Suddenly, everything changed. The woman I married was alive, but the shadows of her family's past were far darker and more twisted than I ever expected. This revelation cast doubt on everything. Every strange phone call, every secretive glance, every whispered warning seemed to be about something far more complicated than I'd thought. Who was really watching us, and why? Was the threat tied to the sister's disappearance or something else entirely? And what part had Emily played in all of this? Were her secrets just survival, or was there something more sinister hidden beneath the surface? My mind reeled, the paranoia tightening its grip. The people I thought I could trust, Mark, Rachel, even Emily, were suddenly wrapped in layers of deception and silence. I questioned my own memories, wondering if I'd ever truly known the woman I'd married, or if I was living alongside a stranger who had been wearing a mask all along. The truth was no longer clear, and every answer seemed to lead to more questions, deeper mysteries, and darker shadows lurking just beyond reach. As I left that cafe, soaked by rain and haunted by Mark's confession, I realized this story wasn't just about a gravestone or a missing past. It was about a family's hidden sins, a web of lies spun to protect something deadly, and a man caught in the middle, desperately searching for light in a darkness that threatened to consume him completely. The stakes had never been higher, and the path ahead was more uncertain than ever. The night I finally confronted the truth was the darkest night of my life, not just because of the shadows that surrounded me, but because of the secrets that finally broke free and threatened to shatter everything I thought I knew. I had tracked Mark to an old, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, a place that reeked of forgotten memories and hidden dangers. The rain was relentless, pounding on the cracked windows like a relentless drumbeat to the climax of this nightmare. As I stepped inside, the stale air wrapped around me like a warning. I wasn't just walking into a place. I was walking into the heart of the storm. Mark was waiting, his face pale and drawn, but his eyes sharp and defiant. He didn't deny the lies or the cover-ups. Instead, he told me the full story, how Emily's twin sister, the one everyone thought was dead, had been alive all along but trapped by the family's darkest secrets. The sister had disappeared to escape a life of manipulation and control, but the family's twisted loyalty had turned to obsession. Mark confessed that he'd been part of the effort to keep the sister hidden, believing it was the only way to protect Emily and the family name. But his guilt had eaten him up inside, and when I started asking questions, he knew the truth would come out no matter what. Then the unthinkable happened. Just as Mark spoke, the warehouse door slammed shut behind me. I wasn't alone. A shadow moved in the corner, and Emily stepped forward, her eyes cold, her expression unreadable. The woman I had loved was no longer the person I thought she was. She revealed the cruel choice she'd been forced to make, to live a life of secrets, lies, and betrayal to protect her family, even if it meant hurting the people she loved most. The twin sisters' disappearance wasn't an accident. It was a sacrifice, a dark pact made to keep the family's secrets buried forever. The tension exploded as Emily accused me of trying to tear the family apart, warning that some truths come at a cost too high to pay. But I couldn't back down. The pieces of the puzzle were finally in my hands, and I demanded answers about the gravestone, the warnings, and the threats that had haunted me. Emily's mask slipped for a moment, revealing the fear beneath, the fear of losing control, of facing the consequences of a past that refused to stay silent. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. Mark lunged toward a hidden door, trying to escape with a box of evidence I hadn't seen before. A desperate chase ensued, the warehouse echoing with shouts, the rain outside intensifying as if nature itself was raging with a storm inside. I caught Mark just before he disappeared into the night, the box heavy in my hands. Inside, documents and photos that finally tied every loose end together. The gravestone marked the death of the twin, a symbolic sacrifice erased from public memory, while Emily's true identity had been hidden behind layers of deception. But just when I thought I had the final truth, the last twist slammed into me like a tidal wave. The photos showed another face, someone I never expected, a man with a familiar smile, someone I had trusted all along. The mastermind behind the entire web of lies and threats was not Emily, not Mark, but someone even closer to me. The revelation shattered my world and left me questioning everything once more. In that moment, the nightmare was far from over. It had only just begun. After the storm of revelations had passed and the pieces of the puzzle lay bare before me, the whirlwind of confusion and betrayal slowly gave way to a fragile clarity. The truth about Emily's twin sister, the family's dark secrets, and the twisted web of lies that had ensnared us was out in the open, yet the weight of it settled heavily on my shoulders. Justice, in some form, was beginning to take shape. Mark's confession and the evidence I'd gathered forced the truth into daylight, exposing those who had manipulated the past for their own survival. But even as I tried to find peace in knowing what had happened, an unshakable feeling lingered, a sense that some shadows still lurked just beyond the edges of understanding. I returned to the cemetery where the gravestone stood. now more than ever a symbol of both loss and deception. Standing there, I felt the years of lies, the secret sacrifices, and the fractured love that had defined this family's tragic story. Emily was gone from my life, her role in the mystery as complex as the woman I had once loved, but in that quiet moment, I realized that the story wasn't just about death or deceit. It was about the parts of ourselves we hide, the histories that shape us, and the costs of truth in a world that often demands silence. Some questions remain unanswered, the kind that twist in the mind long after the final chapter is read. Who was truly behind the threats that haunted us? What became of the twin sister who vanished into the shadows? And perhaps most haunting of all, how many secrets do we carry within the people we think we know best? As I walk forward, these mysteries walk with me, reminders that the past is never truly past and that every truth uncovered is only the beginning of another journey. In sharing this story, I hope you see beyond the surface of a gravestone's date or the silhouette of a missing person. This is a story about love's fragile endurance through betrayal, about the human capacity to carry secrets, and about the haunting power of mysteries that refuse to die. As you close this chapter, remember, sometimes the most unsettling truths are the ones we don't want to face, but the ones that shape us most deeply. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the shadows. Keep your eyes open, your heart strong, and never stop questioning the stories that surround you, because the next mystery could be closer than you think.